So like we mentioned earlier, Dr. Allison Miyamoto, she's in biological sciences, and then Dr. Kristen Kuryansky is in our math department. So let's go ahead and get started. Are you all ready? Awesome, thank you. So our first question is, where did you grow up? Like, what did you want to be when you grew up? Like, did you have like a vision of yourself when you're an adult? Like, this is what I want to be. Whoever wants to start.
Do you want me? I can start. I can start if you want. So I actually grew up around here. I grew up in Anaheim, and if anyone's familiar with Western High School over on the far side of Anaheim, that's where I went to high school. And so I always wanted to be a scientist. And actually, when I was cleaning out some stuff for my parents, I don't know, maybe like 10, 15 years ago, I found a little tiny thing that I had drawn, I think when I was in 5th or 6th grade. And apparently what I really wanted to do then was be on the space shuttle. I wanted to be an astronaut, but I wanted to be a scientist on the space shuttle. I didn't want to be the pilot or anything. So, so I guess I've always wanted to be a scientist, but I really realized I wanted to be a biologist in high school. So that's what I knew.
Awesome, thank you. Kristen?
Yeah, so I also grew up in Southern California. I grew up in Menifee, California. I'm not sure if anyone knows where that is. It's about an hour southeast of Fullerton, so a little bit more in the desert. Gets a little hotter in the summer. So yeah, I grew up in Riverside County, basically. What I wanted to be when I grew up, I feel like that changed every few years. I think at first I wanted to like own a bakery maybe and like bake cakes all the time. And then I wanted to be a professional soccer player. I played soccer very competitively for a lot of my life. And then I like messed up my knee pretty bad. So that threw that out the window. And then I think I always kind of I always enjoyed teaching. And so that was always kind of like something I was always considering, and ended up panning out.
Thank you. And following up to that, like, where did you want to go, or where did you go to undergrad and graduate school? So kind of fast forwarding a little bit. We can start with you, Kristen. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I went to undergrad at Cal Poly Pomona, so really close to Cal State Fullerton. Majored in applied mathematics. And then I did my PhD at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT. So I spent 6 years on the East Coast, kind of experiencing that, and I've made my way back to Southern California.
Awesome, thank you. MIT, wow, that's amazing. Dr. Miyamoto?
Sure. Wow, this is going to sound somewhat familiar. So I went to MIT for undergraduate. No, look at that.
I was going to say MIT's in the house.
Yeah. And this was a long time ago. This was late 80s. So that was a while ago. And so yeah, that was my big move right out of high school. And it was a great experience. So 4 years being on my own, with help, obviously, because we lived in the dorms. And then I went straight to PhD as well. I also came back, but I came back and I went to Stanford. And I got a PhD in cancer biology, which is essentially just a big interdepartmental umbrella program for mathematicians and biologists and chemists. It's a way to get your PhD. So that's how I came back.
Amazing, thank you.
Yeah.
And what was your experience like as an undergrad? Like, what did you do, or I'm sorry, what did you want to do after earning your bachelor's degree? If you had like an idea while you're working on your undergrad, or was it still kind of something you were planning out? And what's inspired you to major in math or science? Dr. Miyamoto, if you want to start first.
Keep going. Yeah, so I came into undergrad knowing I wanted to be a bio major. It's what I really liked. And I didn't experience anything as an undergrad that made me change my mind. So I took lots of science. And so And I hadn't really thought about what I wanted to do after I earned my biology degree, other than the fact that I thought I might be interested in research. So, and that's in fact one of the reasons why I decided to go to MIT, because I knew there was I knew it'd be relatively straightforward to work in a lab as an undergraduate. So I really wanted to do that. And turns out I was right about myself. I enjoyed working in the lab. And so when it came time to graduate, I applied directly to PhD programs because I had a few years of research under my belt by that time. So I don't know what inspired me. I really liked it. I just really liked biology. At the time, the human sequencing and identifying new genes was a big deal. And I think at the time I thought it would have been really cool if I could isolate a new gene and name it. So, but I actually have never isolated a new gene and gotten to name it. But I think at the time that was part of what I was interested in.
That's awesome. Dr. Kuryansky?
Sure, yeah. So I'm a first generation college student, so I really I had like no idea what I was doing, I think, when I went to undergrad. I started out with an undeclared major, so really blank slate. But I'd taken like a lot of AP classes. I had, done a lot of things that kind of gave me a lot of units, so I had to figure out what I wanted to do. I actually contacted my high school math teacher kind of in a panic because I thought that I had to be an engineer because that's what you do when you're good at math. Like I thought that was the only thing I could do. But he told me I could major in math. And I was kind of like, you can just pick math, you can just study math. And I thought that was the best thing ever. He also was the first person to tell me I could get a PhD, which I didn't know that's something you could just decide to do. I honestly didn't know how you got a PhD, let alone that you could just decide one day I'm going to do that. So pretty much since like that, like planted the seed in my head, that became the plan. I'd always, taught. I was always tutoring people, my brother, my friends, my brother's friends, my friends of friends. I was tutoring everybody for free. So like teaching was definitely something that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed helping people understand math. Just by explaining the way I thought about it seemed to help people. So that kind of inspired me to learn more and keep helping people out with it. But I enjoyed a lot of other things too. So it wasn't really clear that I was going to study math, but it did work out. So yeah.
Thank you. And what role did your family play in your academic journey? So was there, or maybe your chosen family, did you have like a support system in undergrad that kind of maybe helped you throughout your whole time? Dr. Kansky, if you want to start.
Yeah, so like I said, no one in my family, or at least my immediate family, my parents or anything, had gone to college. So it was kind of funny when I was applying to undergrad. I was very uninformed about applying to schools, and I just wanted to stay close to home. Hence why I went to Cal Poly Pomona. So I really only picked schools based on where they were, and then once I got to college and decided I wanted to do grad school, I didn't really have anybody in my family to ask about that. So I talked to lots of faculty members in undergrad. I was pretty shameless about just asking all the questions I had and trying to figure out, what do I need to do? What's the next step? But my family was really supportive. I mean, my mom actually, she's probably math phobic, if that's a word. She really doesn't enjoy math at all, but I try really hard to tell her about my research and she's like, yeah, sounds good. She's really supportive. She's like, yeah, whatever you want to do is great. But she's like, I don't really need to hear about it. So yeah, I had a supportive family. They just didn't really understand what I was doing. Even when I went to grad school, I had been there for about 3 years. And one of my brothers asked me, what are you doing over there again? And I was like, I've been here 3 years. I'm getting my PhD. He's like, oh, that's cool. Like very like kind of like not really involved as much, but still supportive. So
Sorry, I just fast forwarded a bunch of
That's
slides.
okay.
What I would,
Oh,
yeah. Go for it, Dr. Yamada.
Okay, all right. So yeah, I also had a supportive family. Actually, my dad was, I think, in the first generation of his family that went to college, and so he was an engineer. Um, and my mom went to what they called secretarial school, so she learned shorthand and typing and all that kind of stuff. So they were very supportive, and but they didn't know what I was doing either. They internalized that it was biology. Like if I said biology, they kind of understood, but I still don't think they totally get it. They totally got what I was doing in the lab. I think once I got this job, it actually became a little bit easier because they know I teach and they understand that part of it.
Thank you. And I think too, a lot of that speaks to like academia and how like the world of academia is kind of in itself, like, kind of separate from, especially if like your parents, or family members weren't exposed to that or weren't in the field, and like kind of educating them on what that entails, especially I'm assuming both of you spent a lot of time, not at home, like what that means for family roles and things like that. I totally understand explaining that kind of over and over, like, why are you in the lab so late and things like that. But thank you for sharing. And throughout college and undergrad or grad, like, who is your support system in college? Like, did you have a particular faculty advisor or mentor as an undergrad, or it could be in graduate school? I know Dr. Kiranti mentioned a math teacher that you had in high school. Was there anyone else that kind of helped guided you like along the way in the academic setting?
I had a nice tight group of friends in college, so that was really my support system. And we all lived in the same dorm the first year, so that's how we got to know one another. And the but in terms of the faculty, I was pretty quiet in college. I didn't really interact with my instructors very much. We tended to interact with the grad students though, and they had recitation sections. That's probably what you had to do. So they're like SI sessions, right? If you've been to those, but with the graduate students. But even then, we didn't see them that often. So somehow I managed to get through without a strong faculty advisor. I did, there was a postdoc. So the lab I worked in for a few years, my immediate supervisor was a postdoc. And so he was quite useful and helpful when I was applying to graduate school, whenever I had questions.
Thank you. Dr. Kiranti?
Yeah, so I had a few advisors and mentors. So I did some undergraduate research at Cal Poly Pomona. So I had Dr. Jennifer Switkiss, Dr. John Rock. They were two faculty members I worked with on projects. And I did a summer research program as an undergrad at MIT. And so there was some faculty at MIT I knew kind of like as I was going into that. But also Cal State Fullerton, and I think the Cal State system has like a very welcoming environment, and at least in my experience with the faculty, felt very approachable. It felt like I could talk to them and seek advice. So I did that a lot at Cal Poly. I could probably name like 6 or 7 math faculty members that I knew pretty well, and I talked to about how do I apply to grad school, what classes should I take, all these different things. And they're very approachable, really helpful. And I would just go to office hours all the time. So I would kind of show up in office hours, ask all my questions, and I would also like read the textbook before lecture, and of course not understand all of it. By the time I got to lecture, I would have so many questions ready that while we were doing the lecture, I would be like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that in the book, like what was going on there, and get the conversation going. And I think that helped me kind of like develop some sort of like mathematical like relationship with different mentors, and they kind of sensed that I was trying to like understand these deep ideas. And so it made it very easy for me to ask for more advice and more help on how to navigate undergrad and grad school.
Awesome, thank you. And I know summer research is definitely really helpful for students to kind of get familiar with labs, to get their, kind of more familiar with like just the whole process of being in research. So thank you. Um, when did you know you wanted to go to grad school? I think Dr. Clancy, you mentioned when somebody like told you they could definitely see you there. But was there like a time or a moment where you yourself were kind of like, okay, this is what I want to do? And then why did you decide to pursue graduate school? And then how did your undergraduate experience prepare you?
Yeah, so I kind of decided, like, my freshman year of undergrad, when I found out that was something I could do, I was like, then let's do that. Let's learn all the math. Um, so that was kind of when I decided. And from then on, the rest of my undergrad was, what do I need to do to make this happen? And so it was, looking out for summer research opportunities, picking my classes carefully, figuring out when to study for the GRE, all of that kind of just started snowballing into the plan for my academic life. I knew I wanted to pursue grad school because I really found a lot of joy in teaching, but I'm not great at communicating complicated ideas to younger students. I don't have that kind of a skill to be as relatable to younger students, or so I knew I didn't really want to teach K through 12. So I was like, okay, well, how do I teach college? And then I found out you definitely need a PhD, and so it was kind of like, all right, that's what I'm going to do. And yeah, my undergrad experience, I would say summer research was like a big help there, especially I think in math, it's not, at least from my understanding, it's not as common to be able to find like good summer research experiences, because you kind of need a certain level of understanding of the basics to be able to do anything really. So it can be kind of a steep on ramp, but I was really happy that Cal State Fullerton actually has a ton of summer research programs for math students. So the math students looking for summer research, lots of faculty are doing that. And then I also took some grad courses as an undergrad, and that really helped me prepare for like the rigor of grad school classes.
Thank you. Dr. Miyamото?
Yeah. I think I realized pretty early on I wanted to go to graduate school. A lot of my friends are going to medical school. It was either medical school or graduate school, really, for the most part, in our class. It's one of the things I like actually about Fullerton is there's a much greater diversity in what people want to do with their degree. So I think that's great if you are still looking around trying to figure out what you want to do. What served me well, though, being in a place where everybody was either going to MD or going to PhD, is that even if I wasn't talking to the faculty members, I could talk to my peers and figure out what people were doing. So the people a year ahead of me, when they were all taking the GRE, I knew, oh yeah, okay, next year I have to do that. So that's the upside of being in a place like that. But the upside of being here, I kind of like the upsides here better. And I also spent summers. I spent 2 summers at MIT, continuing to do research, and that was, and that was great. I like what you said, Kristen, about the teaching and trying to decide where you wanted to be afterwards, because I had that talk with myself as well. I did not want to, I went a little bit differently, but I didn't necessarily want to teach people who had to be there. So, because I thought about high school, and I thought, no, I would, selfishly, I wanted to work with people who chose to be there. So that's why I wanted to be to teach at the university level.
That's so interesting. Thank you. I feel like for me, it's like age. Like, can I work with teenagers? No, I'm just kidding. Going off of that, like, what was your higher education journey like in a broader scope, or was there any time off between like undergrad to PhD? Did you go straight into the doctoral program? What was that like? Just as like your kind of broader journey story. Dr. Miyamото, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. So I went straight. So MIT actually, I think, had fewer courses you had to take than at Cal State Fullerton. It is, I have to admit, as much as I love our degree program, we have made the degree program a little hard to navigate. The biology degree, there are all these little things you have to meet in order to get the degree. It was much more straightforward at MIT. They just sort of kind of let you loose and had you pick a number of courses and you were done. So I had enough time to take the GRE while I was still in class. So I didn't take a year off. I kind of, in retrospect, I wish I had. What I wish I had done, I think, is waited and maybe tried to get a job in biotech first. I think that would have been useful at this point, but not upset that I didn't, but it would have been nice, I think. And I think I would have gone into graduate school with a stronger idea of what I wanted to do, and graduate school would have taken less time. So I ended up, all that time I saved by going straight into grad school, I ended up spending just longer in grad school figuring out what I wanted to do.
Just totally fine. Thank you. Dr. Kiriansky?
Yeah, so I also went straight into a PhD program. I think so. I had taken, like I said, I'd taken a lot of AP courses in high school, and I kind of started off, like, hit the ground running in my bachelor's degree. So that allowed me to take some graduate courses in my senior year, and I kind of felt like I was pretty prepared. That being said, I was not as prepared as I thought. I feel like when you get to grad school, I used to joke that I went to grad school because I was good at math, just to find out that I was not good at math. It just feels like it, sometimes it can hit really hard, like that the level just really jumps. So I felt that like pretty quickly in my first year. I was like, whoa, feeling a bit over my head. So there were times that I was, I thought about leaving or, trying to do something else. I ended up sticking it out, but I think I probably would have benefited from maybe like either taking time off or even just like maybe pursuing a master's first and feeling more prepared. But it worked out in the end, and I was excited that for the PhD programs, at least in many STEM fields, you get paid to be a student, or you get paid to be, I used to call myself a professional student because that was my job. So like that was very appealing to me at the time too. So like I was kind of weighing those things, but so I did go straight into it, but it was a bumpy ride. So I know on the outside it looks like, oh, bachelor's, PhD, like professor. It looks very linear, but it feels very non-linear when you're in it.
Thank you. And we just had a panel last week of current PhD students that are alum from Cal State Fullerton, and I feel like they're feeling that right now in their first year, a lot of them. So is there anything that you did to kind of help, navigate that, or was there something that really helped you navigate, the difficulties, especially being like a first year PhD student, just figuring out like your path?
Yeah. So I think the first couple weeks I started using the counseling services on campus. That was a huge help to just kind of like frame what I was going through, and like also kind of hear like, yeah, this is common. I was like, oh, great. Like not great, but also made me feel a little better. So I use the counseling services on campus. I tried to reach out to friends and kind of work together on problem sets and classwork to try to explain it to each other, because it just wasn't as the material wasn't as accessible, and the faculty wasn't as accessible. So I felt like I was floundering a little bit there, but just reaching out for help. And at some point I ended up, I was kind of in not a great fit for my advisor. Not that they were a bad person or anything. It just, our research interests weren't quite fit as nicely. So I ended up switching advisors, and that kind of like was the best decision. I just had a much better time working with someone whose personality was similar to mine and work ethic was similar to mine. So that also helps. So finding a good mentor in a grad program, I think I wish I had spent more time searching for a good mentor and figuring that out, rather than kind of like doing what I thought they should do. I don't know, kind of vague, but that's what helped.
Yeah, no, I think that totally makes sense, because they're choosing you, but you're also choosing them, right? And like the support that they provide for you as a PhD student, like you said, they are paying you to be a student. And for those of you that don't know, PhDs are usually supported through fellowships or funding through the department or through the college. So hopefully you're not paying to be in the program. Not that that is not also known too, like some programs do. But for the most part, especially in sciences and STEM, the hope and the goal is to have that, fellowship and stipend paid for you for tuition, for living expenses, and you kind of taking into consideration the whole, kind of culture too, and who you're working with. So I know that came up a lot last week too, is like choosing your mentor and how important that is. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
So just a quick add-on. Yeah, if anybody is interested in a PhD program and you're in STEM, if somebody asks you to pay, you should not apply. I know that, yeah, I realize in the humanities that's not the case, but if that's not going to be a good program if they're asking you to pay.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I think going forward, like, were there some challenges that you faced as a student? I know you maybe touched on this a little bit, and then how did you overcome these challenges? If you want to elaborate maybe a little bit more. Dr. Miyamoto, do you want to start?
Oh, sure, I can start. Yeah. I think the one that was really important to me actually was when I was a sophomore and I took cell and molecular biology. It was a sophomore level course. It was the first time that they asked us to understand how experiments were performed. We had to understand the techniques, Western blotting and Northern blotting, for those of you who are biology majors. And you had to start writing about experiments, like theoretical experiments on exams. And it was the first time I'd ever had to do that. And I struggled really hard. They were open book exams. I thought, oh, this will be fine. I had like 100 sticky notes on where everything was in my textbook. And that doesn't help, right? If you're trying to come up with an experiment. So I really had to find a new way to think about what I was doing. And so I came up with new systems, how I was taking notes, what I was doing every week, so I didn't get behind, because that was the big deal. And I did and I started going to office hours as well to talk to people, to try to figure this out. It took a little while, but by the time I left MIT, I was very comfortable raising my hand in recitation sections and asking for help and figuring things out. And so that was one of the big achievements, challenges and achievements that I had as a student. And it really turned me around. I think had that not happened, I don't know what I would have done. But that was mine.
Thank you. Dr. Kansi?
Yeah, so I think, so like I mentioned, just like struggling with that first like year or two of grad school it's always tough. But I also struggle. I feel like this happened at the beginning of undergrad and the beginning of grad school, where you just feel like you're the only person that doesn't know what's going on. And that's just not the case. And especially when you see other people doing the nod, like they totally know what's happening and they don't know what's happening. I mean, maybe they do, but I've called people out on that before. I've been like, what did they mean? And they're like, I don't know. Why were you nodding? So that kind of feeling. I think undergrad was like a pretty good experience. Obviously, some of the classes were hard, but I felt like very supported at Cal Poly Pomona. When I got to grad school, I think this happens to a lot of students who go to grad school. And I think it happens to undergrads at MIT too. So I'm sure Allison probably felt the same way. But when I feel like when I got there, everybody around me had also been like the top of their programs. And so you kind of get there and you're not the top, and like you're not the best, you're average. And I was like, wait, I'm working just as hard. Why is this not working like it used to? And that was kind of like a reckoning of like, that the work I'm putting in isn't like defining who I am as a person or like my value. It was really hard for me to separate those things because that had always been what I associated with, I'm good at this and that's what I know about myself. And that kind of really flipped on me when I got to grad school. So that was tough. It sounds kind of like that's not a real problem, but it felt like a problem at the time. So yeah, I think just kind of coming to terms with like what your output is, and like when you're putting in hard work, and like trying not to let that define like your worth or how you value yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I think a lot of times, especially in academia, the value is your grades, right? Like it's that letter that's next to your GPA, and then it's the GPA that we give so much value to. And I think a lot of the times, students, especially that are currently in their undergrad, might not be looking at PhD or graduate schools if they withdrew from one class, or if they failed that one class, or if they got like a D in that one class, you know? And so I think kind of thinking about how accessible it can be, right? With also the reality of like, is it as accessible, and how do we support students to go on, right, to PhD programs or graduate school or professional schools as well. But I think part of that is the worth tied into that number, right? Or to that score, or to, you know, all these, you know, different pressures that they're experiencing as well. But
Yeah.
it sounds like, yeah.
Yeah, I just thought of something that actually that first year experience you're talking about, Kristen, that MIT was really nice. They had basically a week of orientation before classes started as a freshman. And so you came onto campus early and you met the other freshmen. And you lived in your own room. You had your own room because nobody else was back. So you had your own room for a week, and then hopefully you'd find friends. And then you'd all, you know, decide to live somewhere in some dorm together if you wanted to. So it was very hard that first week, trying to go to sleep in this empty room with no furniture because it's not your room. And but some of those conversations really helped me, because you're right. You go there and you think, you know, there's going to be a bunch of super smart people at MIT, and I don't know how I slipped through the cracks, but somehow I got in. And then you say that to somebody. We had this conversation, and there were like 5 of us, and we all felt exactly the same way, right? Like somehow you had to have been the mistake, and we all, and yet here we all are, and we're all, so you're like, oh, well, maybe this is going to be okay. Like if we all feel like that, then we weren't really a mistake. And if we, kind of fall back on the things that got us here in terms of hard work, I had to come up with new ways of studying, but those core characteristics of I really like to work hard. I wasn't afraid of working hard, or eventually asking questions, that was gonna work eventually.
Yeah. And I think the institutions themselves kind of, you know, have that prestige to them where it's like MIT, right? And just you having that message, like you're pointing at, is what, you know, students or some people would call imposter syndrome, right? Like feeling like you don't belong in these spaces that are maybe not meant for us to belong in sometimes, right? So how do you create that community and talk back to that? And how do you create your own spaces? Like find, you know, your own, you know, kind of places where you know you could be successful and you feel like you belong. And I can only imagine what that's like at MIT. I don't know if you both want to speak to how you found that there, or if there's something that really made you feel like you belonged, or if you ever had that moment, or maybe you didn't, I don't know. But just kind of going off, you know, into that tangent, was there something that, you know, did you ever feel like, okay, 100% I belong here?
It's funny because I definitely felt that. Like I remember someone explaining imposter syndrome to me, and I was like, I have it so bad that I was like, no, I can't have imposter syndrome. Like I had imposter syndrome about having imposter syndrome. I was like, no, like I can't even have that. Like it's real. Like I really shouldn't be here. I think what Dr. Miyamoto said was like very key, is just like realizing that everybody else felt that way too. That was like, oh wait, everyone else feels like they snuck in and like they're gonna find out. Um, I think I felt like I really belonged there when I was a TA, so I led some recitation sections, and at first I was like, oh my gosh, I have to teach these really smart kids calculus, and I'm going to get destroyed, and you know, I had all these thoughts, but it actually turned out really great, and the students were very, very nice, and you know, really appreciative, and they were, of course, I felt like they were all doing very amazing things, like owning businesses and like writing children's books. And I had all kinds of students doing these things that I was like, wow, I feel like a failure, but I'll teach you calculus. That's fine. And so it was just kind of like, just kind of taking things as they come. I think I felt very comfortable in the classroom. So that was something I clung to. I felt like very relieved when I finally like defended my thesis and was like, okay, like I've done this, nobody can take that from me. Like, so like for the end there, I was feeling like pretty confident. But yeah, I think just talking to other people and realizing that it's not just you and you're, gonna be okay, you're gonna push through it. And one thing my mom helped me kind of think about, because I would call her in a panic, probably weekly, if not more. And she kind of said, the time is going to pass either way. The 4 years, the 6 years, whatever it is going to pass. So what do you want to happen at the end? Like you could leave, you could end it here and leave with your master's or go do something else. But when that 6 years like comes up, how are you going to feel about what you did? Like, do you want to finish or are you going to be okay if you don't? And so that kind of helped me like really focus on like getting this done and, putting my head to the ground and just moving forward.
Yay, mom. And that's without going to college. She understood what you needed to hear. That's amazing. Yeah. Go, mom.
It's
Dr.
like
Riota, do you want
solid
to add
mama
anything?
vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was going to say something, and I think that tiredness has kicked in. I've forgotten what I was going to say.
I think we have a couple more slides that we could go through. So like what is one thing about being at CSUF that you love? Are there any challenges that you face as a professor? Do you want to go ahead and start, Dr. Vivetta?
Sure, I'll start. So I do love the challenge of actually teaching the course. So trying to think up new or better ways to make the content more accessible. I find myself now, like if I'm not thinking about other things, something will occur to me and I'll get very excited about some new analogy I've just thought up that might explain some biological process. So I do get excited about that more often than I did. So I really enjoy that. The challenge with teaching for me has always been grading. I have a really hard time with grading. It's hard to come up with good exams. It's hard to know that you're really testing the right thing. And I am a procrastinator by nature, so trying to keep up with all the grading is tough for me. I do struggle at that.
I can only imagine for sure. Dr. Kiransky?
Yeah. So this is my first year at CSUF, so I feel like I don't have a great perspective yet, like on things that I enjoy about it. But I have been having a really good time so far, and even though we're all remote, I felt really supported by my department. So it's been awesome. I feel like I can, again, just like I was an undergrad, reaching out to mentors. I'm doing it now. So I reach out to faculty, and I'm like, I have this issue with teaching, or I have this issue with this. Like, what do you suggest? Have you felt this way before too? And there's dozens. They have, oh yeah, I had that happen to me 5 years ago, and they can tell me what happened and what's the worst case scenario. How can I handle it now? So I think having those peers that I really feel comfortable reaching out to has been really helpful. Starting this position and feeling like part of the Titan family. Grading, I'm going to upvote that too. That's rough. That takes so much more time than you think it's going to. But I think my biggest challenge is managing my time well and kind of figuring out, you could spend all day, all the time teaching. Like there's always something to make better. There's always a typo. There's always something to fix. There's always something to post, another resource. And but professors have so many other responsibilities, research, committee work, all developing courses, writing papers, just so many other things happening. And I find myself needing to be a lot more intentional about, okay, this 30 minutes, I'm not going to open Canvas. This 30 minutes, I'm going to write this grant proposal, or at least read what my collaborators have written, and like, just set aside chunks of time to do very specific things, because I could spend 24 hours prepping my teaching and it still wouldn't be done. So that's been tough.
Thank you. And I think I've heard once, like, the more you obviously, like, both of you are here, you put a lot of time into your courses, and the more you do that, it definitely, it's never ending. Like, there's never to that point maybe that you get that you're just like, okay, this is the perfect course, or this is the perfect Canvas page.
It's right. It's true.
So I
It
think
is.
that
I
just
think
means you
especially
care,
because
though,
you're
right? Like,
scientists, right? You're scientists, and so you want to, you realize that this is, you're like, ooh, I could try this out, right? Like, you hear about a new technique. It's like you would in a lab. If you hear about a new technique, you want to try it out. So you learn something new, like, oh, or some new tool, and you want to try it. And there's so many things to try, and yeah, it is. It's amazing. It doesn't end. It's never perfect.
and it means you care, like, you care about the courses you teach, you care, right, about our students. And I think the last kind of question that we have, if you had a time machine, there's two questions here, you don't have to answer both. The first one is, if you could use a time machine to travel to the past, what advice would you give to your younger self, or what advice would you give to students? Either one's fine. Dr. Vimeta, do you want to start?
Oh yeah. So it might be sort of the same. I would, my advice to students, and it would have been to myself, would be to search out your professors. Like, your professors have come to Cal State Fullerton because they enjoy teaching, because they enjoy working with students. I really enjoy that. I want you to learn from the mistakes I made as an undergrad and not make those same mistakes. So if you come to me in office hours, I will certainly try to help and try to make it better, come up with something. I might have an idea. So that would have, and I should have done that when I was in school instead of just winging it and hoping it would work out. I got lucky a lot of times, but that was not a good way to do things.
Thank you. Dr. Kuransky?
Yeah, so that's really good. And it's true that, we specifically choose to teach at a Cal State, and specifically Cal State Fullerton, because the environment is, it's very welcoming to students. We want to be mentors. We want to focus on teaching. Like, that's very specific part of our job here. I think what I would tell myself, and probably what I would tell my past self, and by past self, I mean like 10 years ago and also like last week, is to be kinder to myself, or to not be so hard on myself. I think, especially as academics or scientists, it's just very easy to critique and to say, like, this could have been better, that could have been better, and to not take the time to celebrate when things do go well, or to just like take a breath and say, this is good enough, it's going to work. So just to, not be so hard on myself. And I think also I had a lot of anxiety about when I didn't understand something, especially in grad school, when it didn't click for me as quickly as I wanted it to. I had a lot of anxiety about that. And I think just like taking a deep breath and taking the time to dig into the material without that anxiety, which just doesn't help when you're trying to learn something new, would have probably served me very well, especially those first couple years.
Thank you. Thank you both for your wisdom and for sharing your stories with us today. We really, really appreciate it. Any students that are here with us, if you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat. I think that was the last question that we had for you. Or you can unmute yourself, feel free. I'm looking at the list.
Yeah.
I could also stop recording, and then maybe that'll allow people to ask questions.
Yeah, that's
So I'll
fine.
go ahead and stop recording here.
Yeah, what Kristen said just made me think of something that